Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the planet Earth, the John Campea Show, coming to you from right here on my YouTube channel. I'm, of course, your host, John Campea. It is an awesome honor and privilege, as it is every day, to have you, my international friends, join us as we talk about our favorite things in the world, movies, movie news, a little bit of television, a few other things here and there as well. And it wouldn't be as glorious of a day as it could possibly be if the sun wasn't shining down on the glory that is one Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, how you doing today, sir?
John, you know, people keep hanging on nicknames to me, and I was called the sci-fi sommelier yesterday, and it all began with you. It all began with you, John, and calling me the master of fun and wonder, so I will take it.
And listen, guys, we have a lot of stuff. Actually, there's a whole bunch of stuff we need to cover today. The agenda is a little bit packed here today, guys. We're going to get into our main topics in just a little bit, of course. But before we get into our main topics, we're going to go off the top with a couple of things. And one of the things we're going to go off the top is with this. Of course, at the most recent Academy Awards, history was made as the first time ever that a comic book movie won the Academy Award for Best Lead Actor. Now that, of course, was Joaquin Phoenix winning the award for Joker. Joker was a smash-out success. Despite all the complaints that people had when it was first announced, oh, it'll never work without Batman being in it and blah, 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 blah. This movie, and if it's not connected to the DCU, what's the point? And blah, blah. Anyway, the movie was a smash hit, made over $1 billion at the box office, and was nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. And, of course, as we mentioned, Joaquin Phoenix won for Best Lead Actor playing the title role. The question has come up a bit, though, lately about whether or not and if they are going to do a sequel to The Joker. Now, there are many people, myself included, and I'm sure probably most of you, that feel like a sequel to The Joker is inevitable. After all, we just mentioned the fact that the first film made over $1 billion. In most cases, that settles the argument. The discussion is done. No more discussion needed. It made over $1 billion. You're going to do another one. And that is probably most likely the case. However, there are also some people like myself that believe and hope they don't do another one. I mean, this movie, it's not just that this movie was great. Lots of movies are great and you can do sequels. But there are some people like myself that feel like another movie will actually kind of undermine what they did and what they accomplished in that first movie when you look at the nature of the film and what it was. Because if you do a sequel, you're just going to spin in traditional comic book territory. Everything else has already been done. So, and that's would kind of undermine the brilliance of the first one, but whatever. One of the people who attended the Academy Awards when Joker won and got all of its glory was, of course, one of the stars of the film, Zazie Beetz. And Zazie Beetz has come out, and during an interview, I believe it was with MTV, she actually kind of expressed she doesn't believe they should do another one. Understanding that they probably will, but she doesn't really think they should do another one. She said the following. She says, I don't know if it needs one. Talking about Joker having possibly a sequel. I don't know if it needs one. I think there's a lot of strength in not milking something. Honestly, I feel like Todd Phillips, of course, who directed it, would be the person to do that tastefully. I think if he felt that it needed one, I really trust him. He's really creative and smart for sure. So she's not coming out and lambasting any notion. She's not trash talking the idea of Warner Brothers doing another one because it would make a lot of sense. But I think a lot of people will kind of identify with what her position was. This was a movie that not only doesn't need a sequel, it would almost be counterproductive to it. But again, at the same time, I understand the business of it, so they'll probably do it, and I can completely understand why. Rob, you hear the comments of somebody like Zazie Beetz saying she doesn't feel that this movie needs one, but at the same time, the film made over $1 billion, so what are you going to do? What are your thoughts on her comments, and what would you do?
Well, I think the obvious answer is not to do necessarily a sequel artistically. Financially, I think it demands a sequel. You know, the movie, for its budget and how much it ended up making worldwide, it's probably one of the most profitable films in Warner Brothers history. But in order for it to continue that kind of profitability, you would have to carry on that story in a way that all the fans and the people that turned out for the first one would accept and believe. So if they turned it into standard comic book fare, I think that would be counterproductive. However, if they went into some really interesting, like the idea, the seeds of revolution were planted at the end of that film. And if it could be some combination of, I don't know, Fight Club meets Red Dawn. You know, I don't know, but something unexpected, something that was as unique and genre bending as the first film was. But it has to be grounded. It has to still speak to, I mean, whether it's addressing issues of mental health and whether it's addressing issues of inequity of healthcare and the rich versus the poor, and all of those are ripe to be mined. Those issues they're so of today, and I think, John, look, it's going to take some deft screenwriting on someone's part, let me tell you. But I think if somebody really put their minds to it, and I think Todd Phillips, he wouldn't just come back and do something if he didn't believe. I mean, maybe not, dangling enough cash. But I think he knows that why the first movie, nobody expected that kind of success. But it really was a zeitgeist film. And if they come up with something that's equally sort of now and connects with people on way beyond what I think a traditional comic book movie does, and it deals with those issues, those tough issues of today that people are dealing with in their real lives, they could come up with something pretty interesting.
It's going to be difficult, though, without just making
I know.
where we end off with Joaquin as Joker in that movie, like we were looking at the doorway moment, right, where he transitions from Arthur truly into being Joker. And my fear is that it just becomes another run-of-the-mill comic book movie at that point. So you're right. It would take a lot. It would take some very, very skilled screenplay writing. Question is, guys, how do you feel about that? Do you agree with Zazie Beetz? This is a movie that does not need another one? Or are you kind of going with the business people going, are you kidding me? You have to do another one. Of course you do. And you're looking forward to it. Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, let's go to another off the top topic here. And that would be this. Speaking of Academy Awards, one of the most successful directors of the last number of years, where getting his films to get a lot of Academy Award buzz, is, of course, David O. Russell. When you're talking about, he did like 3 movies in a row that all got big Oscar buzz. You're talking about The Fighter, which actually won Christian Bale an Academy Award. You're talking about Silver Linings Playbook, which got Academy buzz. You're talking about American Hustle, that got a lot of Academy Award nominations. He did Joy, okay, whatever. But anyway, he's had great success with Christian Bale and whatnot. And of course, he and Christian Bale, we've known for a little while now, are already setting up their next film together. Well, what is interesting is that they've just added another name to that. And that other name is 2-time Academy Award nominee herself, Margot Robbie, who's going to star alongside Christian Bale in the next David O. Russell film. Rob, we know very, very little other than the director and the cast involved and who the producers are. We know very, very little about this film. But seeing David O. Russell working with Christian Bale, who, again, the last couple of times they worked together, we got American Hustle and The Fighter, which won Christian Bale an Academy Award. And you add into that mix 2-time Academy Award nominee Margot Robbie, you can't help if you're a film. I mean, come on. If you're a film fan, you cannot help but at least be intrigued by this. This has got to get you salivating at least a little bit, even without knowing a single thing about the movie. Knowing the talent they're getting in front of the camera, combined with who the director of this thing, which is the most important position, and the history of the director with the lead actor in it, this has got to be exciting news to anybody who's a film fan. So I read this, I was very excited, despite the fact of not really knowing anything about it. Rob, you hear about this. Are you excited for this? Are you tempered? Do you think that maybe this is an odd match? How do you see it?
I think it's fantastic. I mean, I love Margot Robbie. She talk about a breakout star. She goes from, being on a TV show to becoming an Academy Award caliber actress, doing things like I, Tonya, Wolf of Wall Street, working with some of the best people in the business. And she's now producing her own stuff. And to team up with Christian Bale, another one of my favorite actors. And David O. Russell, for me, he hasn't always been, he's been a little hit and miss for me, but he's still an incredible filmmaker. And in terms of, I'm always talking about authorship, the man is a visionary. And he really has a very unique take on the world. And I think all of his films, whether you love them or not, are all worth seeing. And that's pretty incredible to say about a filmmaker. So to me, this makes me John Ghibli.
Ghibli. It is indeed Ghibli. So guys, listen, how do you feel about that? Maybe you're the type of person that's like, you know what? I don't care who's involved with the film. I don't really get excited until I hear what it's about. That's understandable. Maybe you're jumping through the roof right now. What do you feel about Margot Robbie joining up with Christian Bale and David O. Russell for their next project? Jump down to the comment section below and leave us your thoughts. Okay, guys, one more off the top for us to talk about here, and that is this. Speaking of, really big directors of this generation, a lot of people have been waiting very anxiously for the next Wes Anderson film, which is called The French Dispatch. What we've known about it, we've had some brief summaries online about the plot of the thing, and we've also know that it's got an incredible cast. An incredible cast. Filled with veterans working in Wes Anderson films, a couple of new faces. You got, who I believe is going to become the next Daniel Day-Lewis, Timothée Chalamet is in there. You got Adrian Brody in there. You got Benicio del Toro in there. You've got Bill Murray in there. You've got, the list goes on and on and on. Well, Rob, the first trailer for The French Dispatch, because a poster came out yesterday, but the first trailer for The French Dispatch came out. You can see more of the names there. Bill Murray, Owen Wilson, Tilda Swinton, all of course, Frances McDormand, all of course who have worked with him before. Adrian Brody, Benicio del Toro, Jeffrey Wright, who's going to be in the new Batman film. The voice of Jeffrey Wright is almost up there as being iconic as Jeremy Irons and James Earl Jones. I love this guy's voice. Léa Seydoux, who I have loved ever since Blue is the Warmest Color. Granted, a very filthy movie, but when you get past the great filthy, you also have one of the most deeply emotional love stories of a movie we've seen in decades. I absolutely love that film, and I love her. Again, the aforementioned Timothée Chalamet, all on. Rob, I started watching this trailer, and the first thing I thought, fairly or unfairly, was, this just looks like the Grand Budapest Hotel. Visually, as you're looking at this trailer, it just exactly feels like the Grand Budapest Hotel. Of course, it's a very different movie, but it is an intriguing movie. I will admit, if it wasn't for the specific list of names in the cast, and if it wasn't for the name Wes Anderson, I don't know how I'd feel about the trailer in and of itself, all on its own. If it was filled with other actors, and I didn't know the name of the director, and I just watched that, besides its clear similarities to the Grand Budapest Hotel. Not a bad trailer. Certainly a couple of great moments. That whole thing about it's not for sale. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. I love that moment. That moment was great. I'm not quite sure how I would feel about it, but the fact is we do know it's a Wes Anderson film, and we do know the cast that's in it. And I can't help but be excited about this. Rob, you had a chance to watch the trailer for The French Dispatch. How did you feel about it?
I loved it. I'm a huge, all the way back to his first feature, Bottle Rocket, which I have the very out-of-print Criterion Blu-ray for.
Of course you do.
I've been a huge Wes Anderson fan. I think I own all of his movies, with the exception of Isle of Dogs, and I loved Isle of Dogs. Elizabeth, my girlfriend, loves Wes Anderson, and I have to tell you, I love this trailer. I don't quite know everything that it's about. It didn't matter, but the last scene when the guys break through the wall on the right,
cops?
and then the cops, and then the explosion comes through on the left, and they start running at each other, and then the one guy comes in from underneath the frame and looks like right into the camera. I laughed out loud. As Wes Anderson is sort of as precise as Kubrick was, and a lot of people say that his films are a little twee or something. And I love The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
Yeah.
I love that film, and what I love about him is he's so weird and off the wall, and yet he manages to get these great actors, and for all of his quirkiness, his films work. I buy into them. He's got this. I love when whimsy is done well, and his films have this whimsical storybook quality to them. It's like reading a classic fairy tale almost, even though they're not really fairy tales. And there's a lot of adult content in his movies. But I looked at this and I'm like, it's about a magazine published by expats in France. I'm like, I'm in. I don't know where he came up with the idea, but I'm in.
All right, guys, question is, have you had a chance to see the trailer for The French Dispatch? And are you like Rob? Are you in? Or did you leave you a little bit confused? Did it feel a little bit too much like Grand Budapest Hotel and maybe some of the other Wes Anderson films? Or are you like, that's exactly what I was looking for? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Okay, guys, with all that stuff down and out of the way, let's now move on to our main topics today. And how do we select our main topics here on the John Campea Show? Well, it's really kind of simple. You see, You guys come up with the main topics by simply going anytime over to www.thejohncampeashow.com/contact. Once you guys get there, you're going to see a form. Fill it out with your topic or question. It's totally free. Hit submit, and then maybe, just maybe, you might see your topic or question featured here as a main topic on The John Campea Show. With that down, let's move on to main topic number 1. And our first main topic today gets submitted to us by Steven, who writes, "Hi, John. Universal and Blumhouse are releasing The Hunt after all. We talked about this a little bit on the second half of yesterday's show. Within a month on Friday the 13th. The new poster and trailer they released actually leans into the satire and the controversy. According to the filmmakers, this lighter and less serious tone is more reflective of the movie. Will audiences give it a chance and see it?" All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And for those of you who don't remember, there was a movie that was supposed to come out last year called The Hunt. And right around the time as they started marketing that film, there was a number of tragic gun-related incidents in the United States, to which the filmmakers and the studio decided, you know what, for now, we're going to pull this thing off the release schedule. It's just a little too sensitive of a time at the moment. And it was probably the right move. But at the time, a lot of us felt that at some point they're going to release this film. They just have to, and they need to. So sure enough, the trailers came back out the other day announcing that it was indeed now getting a release. And one of the things, you're right, they did lean into it a little bit, because one of the phrases on the trailer is, "The most talked about film of the year is one that hasn't even been released." And they went on with that. But anyway, in talking about, The Hollywood Reporter wrote this about it. He says, in an exclusive interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Jason Blum and screenwriter Damon Lindelof, who share credits on The Hunt with Lindelof's Watchmen collaborator Nick Kurse, defend the film as an over-the-top satirical take on the divided state of the Union that is even-handed in its send-up of the opposing factions. "None of us were interested in taking sides with this movie," Bloom says. So, Rob, a lot of us were not going to be surprised at all that this thing was indeed coming back out and going to be released. I think it's important that it gets released. I mean, it does look like a balls to the wall, crazy, ridiculous, but at the same time trying to say something sort of movie, if it is indeed about the State of the Union and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, for a lot of people trying to politicize this movie, it is interesting to note that at least on the surface, the villains of the film seem to be them liberal lefties, whereas our heroes of the film, or more the right, where a lot of people seem, because when I was reading a lot of the controversy about it, mostly, as in most cases when there's controversy, it's usually being argued by people who don't actually understand the subject matter. But right. I was reading a lot about it. A lot of the people who were objecting to the movie thought it was the other way around, and it's not, and I thought that was an interesting take. Anyway, taking the stupid politics out of it, this looked like a not completely original. I feel like we've sort of seen this kind of thing before, but still kind of a wacky, balls to the wall, kind of very hyper violent, hopefully funny kind of thing. And I'm not surprised at all that they decided to bring this back in here. Rob, at this point, do you feel like it's a good idea to bring it back, or is this a movie that should have stayed on the shelf? How do you feel about it?
No, I think, look, I hate it when people, you know, John, movies are so hard to make, and I hate it when people decide something like this should be shelved. I love the idea that it's the woke, the woke far lefties that are the villains of this movie. Because, you know, I used to consider myself left, but I realized, no, I'm a classical liberal, and I think the far left, it can be very dangerous. And I love the idea that they've just decided to take up arms against what they call the deplorables. And I mean, whether that's your politics or not, I love that that's a jumping off point. But again, you know, I've always loved movies with this subject matter. There's an Australian film that we know here as Escape 2000. Right. But it was shot in Australia and released as Turkey Shoot, about an authoritarian government capturing people and hunting them down. It starred Steve Railsback and Olivia Hussey. I always loved that movie. You know, when I was a kid, it was like great Oz exploitation. And so, you know, it all goes back all the way to the story of The Most Dangerous Game. Back, what was that, written in like the 20s? They made like a silent film of it in like 1928 or something. Or maybe it wasn't silent. Maybe it was one of the first sound films. But either way, I love this subject matter. It looks pretty good. I mean, I'm in, you know, there's obviously a sci-fi dystopian element to it as well. It's just one of those genres that it'll always get me. I'll always watch them. So I'll turn out and I'll probably end up buying the Blu-ray, you know.
One of the things that actually hooks me into it is, you know, there are some people saying, you know, I'm not even interested in watching a movie that gets into the politics. But here's one of the things that actually attracts me to this movie. I feel like, and I have not seen the film, so I cannot speak this as fact. I'm just saying I feel like watching it. I feel like this is going to make fun of our obsession with wanting to put politics into everything. That's why I'm kind of attracted to it. I feel like this is going to mock our incessant need to try to politicize everything. And I feel like that's exactly what it's trying to target. And maybe it doesn't. I could be wrong, but that is kind of how it feels, right?
No, I think you're 100% right. And if you think about all of like my favorite satires, all of them are political, whether it's Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, whether it's Network, you know, the I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. You know, I mean, these are some of our great satires because politics gets into all of our belief systems. And, you know, I think our belief systems should always be mocked because it makes people think about what exactly do they believe and why do they believe these things and why do they hold the things they hold dear. And, you know, by showing us them through the prism of a satire, you know, I think it makes people think, but yet it's not going to be as divisive as, say, you know, somebody preaching to you or telling you you're wrong or you're right. It goes down easier, yet it still makes you think. And I think that's the best. That's what film can do almost better than any other medium. So bring it on.
All right, guys, question becomes, what do you think about The Hunt being put back on the release schedule? Were you perfectly happy to see it disappear and never hit a screen? Are you happy that it is coming back? What do you think about the looks of it right now? Jump down into the comments section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, with that down, let's move on to our second main topic today. And our second main topic today gets submitted to us by Geeky Gator, who writes, "Hey, John and crew. The Loki series has cast yet another actor to star in the series with Gugu and Mbatha-Raw. These Disney Plus shows seem to be attracting movie-level stars. What do you think of this casting?" All right, thanks a lot for sending this in, man. And yes, look, one of the things that we've seen, not just with, you know, the Disney Plus stuff, but what we've been seeing over the last couple of years of the type of talent coming into comic book genre at all. Look, we always forget what happened yesterday, let alone what happened 5 years ago. But lest we forget, it wasn't that long ago, everybody, that the idea of a truly big star popping up in a comic book movie, other than the fluke that was getting Marlon Brando to show up in Superman, you know, was kind of considered a hard thing. Like, oh, well, yeah, there's this director, but they would never slum it and do a comic book movie. Oh, yeah, this actor, but they would never slum it and do a comic book movie. We are now living in an age where you got to think really hard about an actor or a top shelf director that maybe wouldn't do a comic book movie. That's the type of art, but I think we take that for granted right now. But it's always great to see talent being added. And if you haven't seen The Morning Show, she's been in a number of other films and she's always great in what she does. She was even watchable in that horrible tragedy known as Jupiter Ascending. But Gugu is fantastic. She's fantastic. Obviously stunningly beautiful. That goes without saying, but she's truly wonderful because you put her into something like The Morning Show, right? Where she is acting alongside some, I think it's fair to say, pop cultural icons. Whether you're talking about Jennifer Aniston or Steve Carell or what have you, she is acting alongside some really heavy hitters. And believe me when I tell you, she completely holds her own in that environment. She's wonderful. So you now take, Rob, a series like Loki. They've already, obviously, Tom Hiddleston's in there. We've got Owen Wilson has now been added to it. And now we have this name added to it. Seeing projects really focusing in on getting great talent always excites me, and I think this is great news, and it just makes me even more excited for this Loki project than I already was. Rob, you hear about the casting. What are your thoughts?
Well, what's not to love about her?
Yeah.
And, you know, she's been in everything from one of my favorite unsung shows, which is known over here as MI6. She was in also recently, I saw her in a film. She's in a superhero movie that sort of flies under everyone's radar called Fast Color, which is an indie film that's about 3 generations of black superheroes in a family. That's really, it's a very different look at at superheroes, but I think she's a terrific actor. She was also in San Junipero, which is one of my favorite episodes of Black Mirror.
Yep.
And she's just one of the most gorgeous women in entertainment today. She's incredibly talented, and I think she's really versatile. She voiced one of the characters in Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance.
That's right. Yes, she did. That's right.
And she's terrific. So what I really like this casting. I really think what they're doing with Loki is, if nothing else, I'm going to be very entertained by this cast. So
oh yeah. So this thing can't get here fast enough for me. I gotta tell you. And the more casting announcements they make, the more excited I get. So anyway, the question is, guys, what do you think about this casting? Or is your excitement level for Loki already at a 10 and there's nothing that can get you more excited? Or like me, does this make you more excited? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right. With that down, let's move on to our third main topic today. And our third main topic today gets sent in to us by Raheem Warsaw, who writes, IGN has announced that Sony has scheduled a release date for a new Marvel movie on October 8th, 2021. Do you think Kraven or Madam Web could be heading for that release date? All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And just a point of order here, IGN did not announce that. What's actually happening is there are a few sites that are reporting this thing, that Sony is going to be releasing another Marvel-related film in October of 2021. Where this information is actually coming from is a oft-reliable exhibitor relations organization. And that's on Twitter. That's where most of these people are looking at now. So that means we have not heard an official word from Sony saying that this is true. So all the headlines you're seeing about this are all coming from that one source. It is, to be fair, normally a pretty reliable source. So let's, for the sake of argument, roll with it for now, but let's all keep in the back of our heads that Sony itself has not yet confirmed this, even though it kind of looks like it's going that way. So just for the sake of argument, let's go with that. Rob, Sony has been very aggressive lately in their approach to the new IP, the Marvel IP they had. They obviously had tremendous success with Venom. That movie made over $800 million. Like, everybody was proclaiming this movie, it made no sense. It can't work without Spider-Man. It's just Sony. It's not going to do anything. I said this movie will succeed. But even I said it wouldn't hit $800 million. I mean, I said it won't hit 800. I said it'll succeed. It'll be good. It won't hit. Don't be stupid. Any of you think this thing's going to hit $800 million is stupid. And what did it do? It hit over $800 million. But they went from that. We've got Venom 2 coming now. We've got Morbius, which we all just were kind of gawking at how good that trailer was for Morbius. Not to mention that they dropped a lot of surprises in it. All that kind of stuff. Now hearing another one. There are a lot of theories going around about if this is true. And if we are getting that October 8th, 2021, that means, Rob, this thing has got to be in motion already. Whatever this project is, it's got to be in motion already. It has to be in pre-production at this point. At minimum, it's got to be in pre-production. And maybe cameras don't roll for another 6-7 months, but they have to be at some stage. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to go out on a limb here, Rob. I believe, as I have believed for a while, the character that makes most sense, and it doesn't need to be this guy, but I think it will be, I think it's Kraven the Hunter. I think there is so much you can do. Kraven is a type of character that is really multifaceted. It's almost like he's a Swiss Army knife of a character. You could take a character like Kraven and fit him into just about any kind of comic book movie you want to do. Whether he's the lead or a supporting character, he can fill a lot of different roles. And when you look at the nature of the character and you look at the Sony universe as they're setting it up now, I think this character could be great. And if you want to try to set up crossover stuff later, dude, listen, ever since I saw the first Venom, I have been drooling at the idea of a Kraven hunting Venom. I've just been, my mind just gets sparkly when I start to think about the potential there of what they could do. Now, that's not to say this is the only character they can be doing this with. Not at all, not in the least. There's a lot of different characters they could do, and they could all be fabulous. But there's just something that tells me, and by the way, I'm not claiming any insider information here, I just think that the character that makes most sense in a universe like this, that gives you great potential for crossover later, I believe is Kraven the Hunter. Rob, let's start with the most basic question. Do you think that this could make sense that they're releasing yet another film in 2021? And if it is, for argument's sake, which character do you think that 2021 movie could be for?
Well, like you, I've been talking about Kraven the Hunter since back in the Collider Hero days.
Yeah.
When I first met you. And I loved Kraven the Hunter. The thing about that character is he's fairly grounded in reality.
Yes.
And in terms of, Kraven's Last Hunt is one of the most, I think, famous, iconic Spider-Man storylines. But the thing about Kraven is he's easily ported over to Venom, because who wouldn't want to hunt an extraterrestrial symbiote? Especially if he becomes more well-known in the public eye after Venom 2, however they're going to play it. And it makes sense to me that you bring in a character like, I love characters like Kraven. I love characters like Deathstroke the Terminator, has always been one of my favorite DC villains, obviously introduced in the pages of Teen Titans. And I love the idea that you have a cunning, a very dangerous person who is someone that doesn't really have a lot of remorse for what he's doing. And I love that. I love those kinds of villains. And again, he's grounded. He's not some wacky villain like the Rhino was, And I think that as a spider, and like you said, crossover potential. Once you've hunted Venom, you go after the most dangerous game, and that is, of course, man, and that leads you to Spider-Man. And I think it'd be great. I mean, I don't know if they'll be able to get it out in 2021, but maybe.
Here's the thing. This is why not only do I think it would be great to do Kraven for all the reasons you just mentioned, I think it's important that whether it's Kraven or not, that Sony continues on to develop this universe. And here's why. I believe comic book movies took a hit when Disney took over Fox. Now, I've talked about this before, and I believe this wholeheartedly. There is advantage for us as movie fans, as comic book movie fans, to there being a diversity of organizations making these comic book movies. Because listen, as great as Marvel does, and everybody knows I'm a huge fan of the MCU, I have some criticisms, but I'm a huge fan of the MCU.
Me too.
Great as they do in mixing up their genres, you got political thrillers, you got comedies, you got more action kind of fare, they mix it up, they do. They are still Marvel movies because it's an MCU that has a philosophy and has a direction for their things, and they are, at the end of the day, still MCU movies. I love the fact that we see DC, Birds of Prey notwithstanding, that we see DC being on a bit of a roll with Aquaman, with Shazam, with Joker. We got Wonder Woman 84 coming, because not only are they giving us good, fun, entertaining movies, they're giving us different movies. And, DC has their own flavor, their own DNA, their own direction and philosophy of making them. And that gives us as an audience a bit of diversity. When we lost Fox and the Fox X-Men universe, they put out some crappy movies, but they also put out some of the greatest comic book movies of all time. When we lost Fox, we lost one of the voices. We lost one of the voices telling these stories that told them in a different way. That, yes, did create some real crap fests of movies, but also created some of the greatest ones of all time. I believe that really makes it all the more important that Sony hopefully succeeds, because it would be yet another voice, a different DNA, a different philosophy a little bit. And that's why, like, when I hear some of my fellow comic book movie fans going, I hope everything goes back to Marvel, I'm like, God, you have no idea what it is you're hoping for. Because you're talking about homogenizing an entire genre. You're talking about homogenizing an entire genre into one DNA. And that's not good for Marvel. That's not good for comic book movie fans. So I really don't just see this as exciting that maybe we get a Kraven or a Madam Web or another movie altogether. But I think it's really important that we see Sony being active and aggressive in trying to do this. And they're going to make some films that are awesome, and they're going to make some films that are terrible. But I still think the fact that they're making them at all, Rob, has inherent value. How do you see that?
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, look, we've got Morbius coming out. Morbius the Living Vampire. I never thought I would ever see a Morbius the Living Vampire movie with Jared Leto, you know. I really did not believe that I would ever see that. And we're getting it, and it looks really good. You know, and I was watching a little bit of Venom the other day, and you know, Venom's pretty fun. I was being a snob about it, but you know, going back and looking at it again, it's pretty fun. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I liked, as much as hit and miss it might have been, I think Fox did a lot of really great stuff with the X-Men movies. X-Men 2, actually X-Men 1 and 2. Days of Future Past, Logan. And I even have a little bit of love for Apocalypse, more than a lot of people do. And I think they did a lot of really interesting stuff with those characters. I'm really excited to see New Mutants. I have high hopes, believe it or not. And I think you're right. I think a diversity, that's why I mentioned that movie Fast Color. That was not even based on a comic book. That's an original indie superhero film, the way Chronicle was, which was also a Fox film. I think we absolutely need more diverse movies. And when I say diverse, I'm not talking about the people in them, although that's great too. I'm talking about the way that the subject matter is adapted. You mentioned Blue is the Warmest Color earlier today in the show. That was based on a graphic novel.
That's true.
And like you said, that movie is shattering. I love that film so much. There's so many different kinds. Like, where's our new Road to Perditions? Where's our new, like, Two Guns was based on a comic book. There's so many interesting, I know The Kitchen was too, but there's a lot of diversity that we could have in terms of superhero movies. And I think, like you, that's why I'm actually up Bloodshot. I want to see Bloodshot. I hope
it's good. I hope it's better than it looks.
Right? Let's see the Valiant universe. Bring that on, son.
And here's the other thing. Like, I think still a lot of comic book movie fans still fail to understand one of the most basic principles, and that's this. You should hope. Like, look, you can like or dislike Marvel movies. You can like or dislike DC movies. You can like or dislike the Sony movies. That's fine. But if you're a fan of the genre, you should hope they're good. You should hope they're good. You know, there's just some people saying, oh, I want Sony's movies bad. Listen to the words of Kevin Feige. Kevin Feige, who on multiple occasions has said directly, it is better for all of us when all these other films do well. It is better for all of us because when people go to a comic book movie, we want them to love it because that increases the chances they're going to come and see our comic book movie. Kevin Feige has said this over and over and over again, and he's right. And he's right. Like, think about how much money the Marvel movies make now, right? Piggybacking on what Kevin Feige said, like, if movies like Batman versus Superman, Justice League, all these other big comic book movies, if they had all been fantastic and everybody loved them, piggybacking on what Kevin Feige said, can you imagine how much more successful the MCU stuff would be? Like, and that's the thing. I just think comic book fans, again, you may watch a Sony comic book movie and not like it, and that's perfectly fine. But you should hope that they're great. Because if it's great, it's good for everybody. And yep. I think Kevin Feige is 100% right about that. And we'll see how that goes. Anyway, guys, question is for you. How do you feel about all this? What more particularly do you think that movie, if this information is true, and we're getting in October 2021, another Marvel-based property being produced by Sony, what movie do you think or hope that could be? Jump on down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right. With that down, let's move on to the fourth and final main topic today. And our fourth and final main topic today gets submitted to us by Eric the Reddington. Oh, I like that. Get the Reddington? Anyway. Hey, John. I saw an amazing fact graphic showing that Avengers Endgame has become the first quote-unquote biggest box office film of all time to not win any Academy Awards. Why did Avengers not get recognized when all the others did? All right, thanks a lot for sharing that, Eric. And what Eric is referring to is a great graphic that's been going around. And I'll be honest with you, I hadn't even really considered this. I hadn't thought about this until I also saw this infographic going around, and it's very, very true. When you look over the past X number of years at all the different films that at different times have held the title of the biggest box office movie of all time, all of them have won Academy Awards. Of course, Titanic has won 11. It's tied with Return of the King. And what was the third one? There's a third movie that's tied with this as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. Anyway, no other Academy film in history has ever won more than 11. So Titanic, which was the biggest box office movie for a while, had won 11. Gone with the Wind had won 10. Star Wars had won 7. Sound of Music had won 5. E.T. had won 4. Jurassic Park, Jaws, The Godfather, and Avatar all won 3. And then we get to the Avengers, Endgame. It won none. None Oscars, Robert. None Oscars. As a matter of fact, it was it was only nominated for 1 Oscar, which is great. So the question is that gets raised here is, why does this movie not get any recognition when there are others in its fraternity, biggest box office films of all time, have? I think there's a couple of contributing factors to it, Rob. One or two small ones, and then one that I think is a major one. I'll share this with you, and then I want to hear what you think about it. I think one of the small contributing factors, well, you know what? No, let me reverse course here. Let me go on what I think the big contributing factor is. The big contributing factor to me is the fact that, unlike all those other movies listed, let's bring them up again here. Titanic, not a sequel, not a part of a shared cinematic universe. Gone with the Wind, not a sequel, not a part of a shared cinematic universe. Star Wars, at the time, not a sequel, not part of any kind of franchise. At the time, not part of any franchise. Sound of Music, standalone film. E.T., standalone film. Avatar, at the time, just a standalone film, as was Jurassic Park, as was Jaws, as was The Godfather. All of these films were standalone at the time, original, straight out of the gate movies. For an original, standalone, straight out of the gate movie to, at those times, hit the box office heights that they had, you could not be anything other than excellent. You had to have an exceptional movie in order to hit those heights at the box office at the time. Times have changed. And see, Rob, I believe one of the biggest factors is why the Avengers is the first film of its kind to not get any Oscars is because, unlike all these other films that we're seeing on this list, Endgame was what? The 22nd film?
22nd film.
It was the 22nd film of a 10-year-long, 27 major Hollywood starring build-up franchise that climaxed in one big thing. And that's great. That's not a negative thing. That's a positive thing. That's a very positive thing. But what I'm saying is it makes it stand out as being very, very distinct from all the other films that are on that list. So you have all those things that we just talked about. Almost every major Hollywood star you can think of, 10 years of build-up, 20-plus films build-up, all culminating in one big thing. That was as much of a contributing factor to the box office success as almost anything else. It's certainly not the only thing. I'm just saying it's one of the big contributing factors. That is a very different set of circumstances from all the other films on that list.
Right.
And so I think whereas the other films needed to have a lot of pure cinematic excellence in them to win some Academy Awards, Avengers Endgame, you definitely had to be really good, but you didn't have to be awards echelon kind of good in order to get there because you had all these other factors as well. I mean, look, one of the other things is simply this. I don't think Avengers Endgame earned any Academy Awards. I mean, I don't think this is a matter that the Academy just decided to turn up its nose to it. As much as I like the MCU and as much as I enjoyed Endgame, and I've lost count of how many times I've watched it now, I've lost count of how many times I've seen this movie now. The fact of the matter is there is no category that it should have won in. It might have been able to get more than one nomination. Like I thought if Avengers Endgame had been nominated for Best Editing, I would have been cool. I would have been comfortable with that. I don't think it should have won, but if it had been nominated for Best Editing, I would have been comfortable with that. I think if it had been nominated in one or both of the sound categories, I would have been okay with that. But But ultimately, at the end of the day, there was no category that it was a standout frontrunner that it should have won. So I think the big major part here is looking at what made Endgame so unique from all those other films on the list. The other thing was there just truly wasn't any category that it really stood out with that it should have won, I think. But anyway, Rob, you look at a really kind of staggering graphic like that, because I hadn't even considered that before, about every other best or highest box office film of all time had won Academy Awards. Endgame hasn't. What's your reaction to it, and what's your personal explanation for it when you think about it?
Well, look, I think you're absolutely right. When you're 22 films into a let's say, a franchise, I think that from the Academy's perspective, it's there's a level of craftsmanship that's just expected. You know, and the Academy Awards are looking for something that's outstanding. And as much as what I think is outstanding about the MCU is the fact that it worked. The fact that after 23 movies, including Far From Home, we have this amazing, epic fantasy, sci-fi, science fiction, superhero tale that we've never seen the likes of before and probably won't ever again.
And to your point, to make that even stand out more, others have tried. DC has tried to do it. They've had limited success. Sony's tried to do it. It just really makes it stand out just how good of a job they've done.
Hell, even Star Wars has tried.
Yeah.
You know, and I think
it succeeded for a little while.
Right. And they can again. And I think that we have seen something that and unfortunately, look, it's not like when Return of the King swept the Oscars, because Return of the King at least they can go back and say, well, it's based on a beloved literary property that's one of the most important works of fantasy of the 20th century. This is based on, after all, comic books. And I think that a lot of the older members of the Academy, you know, Joker's a down-to-earth movie. And it's dealing with real issues, whether, like we said, healthcare, whether it's the inequities of the 1% versus the rest of us. But when you get to Avengers Endgame, we know how difficult it is to pull something like that off. But I think there's a large constituency that is like, come on, it's just another comic book movie choking up our multiplexes, even though we don't feel that way. I certainly don't. I thought it was both Infinity War and Endgame together are a staggering achievement. They really are. But I do think that ultimately that this is overlooked by the Academy as not special. Avatar was special. But this is just, of course, it's another Marvel movie. It's what we expect from them. They know what they're doing. And I think, unfortunately, you know, if you go back and you look what they were able to pull off with both Infinity War and Endgame, I think it's one of the great achievements in fantasy cinema in the history of movies. Because for those movies to work, everybody had to be in place. You had to love all those characters first. If you didn't, man, you wouldn't have cared. But when I was shedding a tear as Spider-Man is disintegrating or Black Panther is disintegrating, yo, man, they got me in a way that you can't underestimate. So it's unfortunate they didn't get recognized, but I understand why.
But I don't know, man. When I think about that, look, we are now at 3 years in a row. 3 years in a row that comic book movies have been nominated in not just the technical stuff, in the major categories. Logan, Best Screenplay. Black Panther, Best Picture. Joker, Best Picture. Best whatever. And honestly, the problem is, Rob, what Academy Award would, like, let's say you're an Academy Award, you're an Academy member. Okay, so Rob, snap my fingers. You're an Academy member, and it's 2 weeks ago while they're still casting ballots. And you're a voter. Do you vote Endgame to win any Academy Awards? Which Academy Award do you give Endgame over the people who did win? And honestly, I can't think of a single one. I think maybe there's an argument for visual effects, but I just, that's why I don't know. When I hear some people say that it's because and this is true to a degree, the crotchety nature of the Academy voters. But then when I've asked friends of mine, a friend of ours, Cliff, right? I asked a friend of ours, same thing. I said, okay, but let's say you're an Academy voter. Which one do you say Endgame deserved to win? Is there any? That's the hard part here.
You know, I would make an argument that to have a 3.5 or 3 hour movie move as fast as Endgame does, that's a marvel of editorial. But then I would also say, but Ford v Ferrari was a beautifully edited movie, and I just. there was a lot more. I think the editorial was a little bit more difficult in Ford v Ferrari, and also if that's fair. And I couldn't say that Endgame is a better edited film than Ford v Ferrari, the winner of that category. You know,
but I'm with you. I would have been cool. I would have been totally okay. Like, I'm okay that it didn't get nominated for best editing, but if it had been nominated for best editing, I think I would have been. I don't think I would have batted an eye at that. I think that would have been. I would have gone, yeah, the editing and it's great, but it's a tough question and a stunning little factoid. Again, full credit to the people who are at Fandom. This is a really stunning factoid that I don't know why more of us didn't think about going into it, but it's interesting at the least. It's interesting. But listen, guys, we are now in an era, not only where films like this are breaking big box office records. We're in an era now, and I think there's so many fans that take this for granted. We are in an era now where not only these films making tons of money, these films, again, we just talked about it 3 years in a row, that the Academy has bestowed the major nominations on comic book films, whether it was Logan, whether it was Black Panther, now Joker. Maybe there'll be another one next year for the 4th year. Maybe Scarlett Johansson next year is nominated for Best Actress for Black Widow. Who knows? Question is, guys, how do you feel about all that? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Okay, guys. With all that down and out of the way, we're now going to move in to the live questions part of the show. And how do you send in live questions? Well, it's really, really simple. There's 2 ways to send in a live question. The best way is to look into the top line of the description of this video, and you're going to see a link here that says this. It's streamelements.com/movieblogtv/tip. Go ahead and click that. You'll be able to send in a tip and send in your question at the same time. There's another way you can also send in questions, which is just using the super chat feature here on YouTube. So before we get to that stuff, Robert and I right now are going to do as we traditionally do. We're going to take a short couple of minute break here, give us a chance to rest the vocal cords, stretch our legs, refill the drink, give you a chance to run and use the bathroom. So let's all take a breather for a moment. Hang in there with us, guys. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere. Guys, and we are back. Thank you so much for your patience and indulgence as we took a little bit of a break there to get ourselves resituated. So, guys, without any further ado, let's start diving into your live questions. And we're going to start off the live questions with the Nerd Errant, who writes, Oscar proposal. All nominees get to put their thank you lists on the Oscars YouTube channel. No time limit. Accepted speeches in the show then will be far more varied than basic reading of the credits for 45 seconds after most award announcements. I mean, I think I could be wrong about this, but I think they kind of do something like that already. I think after they do their acceptance speech, they go behind stage, and I think they answer some more, but in principle, I like the idea of saying, hey, say your thank yous, you got 45 seconds, but then don't worry, come back and you're going to get to do a full 3-minute acceptance speech if you want. That'll be put on the YouTube channel and streamed to the world. I don't know, Rob, do you have any kind of possible alternate option to that?
Well, I think that's not a bad idea, but, everybody, part of the thing people want to hear is, judging by what we have here in the YouTube pundit space, people like to hear their names read on the air. And I think, if there have been many of these actors, especially now, that have been around for a long time, people who have long time careers, they work with the same people for, in some cases, decades. And I think it is important to acknowledge those people publicly. No one builds a career in Hollywood without a team, without a group of people around you that respect you and that work with you and that are supportive of you, as opposed to, say, tearing you down. So I think it's really important that those people are in fact recognized. And I don't mind hearing it because sometimes I'm surprised by what actors or actresses or filmmakers or who they acknowledge. And I think it's great. And every time somebody shouts out to Mom, I always smile.
All right. Next up, Nerd Errant also has another idea here. It says, the Oscars also need to find a way to shed the reputation of outright dismissing popular films. You mean like a $1 billion film like Joker that they just gave major awards to? Anyway, one voter calling Avengers 4 a cash-in and the lack of awards recognition it got, deserved or not, threw fuel on that fire and hurts for your interest. Here's the problem, Nerd Aaron. I feel like we search for excuses to have our iration. Look, Oscar voters are people. You know how many people I've heard say Avengers 4 was a cash-in? Tons. You know how many voting members there are of the Academy? Over 7,000. There are over 7,000 voting members of the Academy. If you and I all know people who say Avengers 4 was a cash-in, well, then of course there are going to be some voting members of the Academy that feel that way too. Because they are just film fans like you and me. And listen, what films hold the record for the most Academy Award win in history? Oh, I don't know. Maybe Return of the King? Maybe what was the biggest box office film of all time for a lot of years? Titanic? They've nominated and honored a lot of big budget films. I think there's just a lot of us feel like, because when popular films we like don't get nominated, we need an excuse in our heads. We all do it. I do it. You do it. We all do it. So we make an excuse. Oscars just don't acknowledge popular films. Well, the problem with that is the facts say otherwise. The most Academy Award win films in history are hugely box office popular films, including one of the biggest box office films of all time. So I mean, do they have that reputation? Yes, but that's only because I think a lot of people artificially put that reputation on them. Are there some people in the Academy who will say dumb things like Avengers 4 was just a cash-in? Well, yeah, because you and I know other people that do that, and they have people that do that too, but that's why there's 7,000 voting members. So anyway, that's just that. I mean, look, if they had ignored Joker and not nominated Joker for anything, maybe, but the Joker's a $1 billion popular film, and they just gave it Best Actor. So, I mean, if you try to clear your head and just look at the facts are the Academy does recognize popular films, but not because they're popular, but because they're excellent. Anyway, that's just kind of my thought on that. All right, Willow writes, speaking of trailers, which is the worst music for their respective trailer? This Is Not the End from Edge of Tomorrow or I'm Going Hunting from Terminator Dark Fate? Those were both, Rob, iconically bad music choices for their trailers. I'm actually going to go with the I'm Going Hunting, but This Is Not the End that they used for Edge of Tomorrow. it was a piece of music that was such the antithesis of what the movie actually was, and set the groundwork for undermining a great movie's box office. Because this movie did not do nearly as well as it could have, because it took some time for people to say, hey, you know that crappy looking movie Edge of Tomorrow? It's actually awesome. It took a while for that word of mouth to get. So I'm going to say the worst out of those two, even though I'm going Hunting was terrible as well, I'm going to say that this is not the end one. What about you, Rob?
I agree with you, because Edge of Tomorrow, and it is called Edge of Tomorrow, even though I have, because of Cliff Stevenson, the All You Need Is Kill Japanese Blu-ray Steelbook. I love that movie. Edge of Tomorrow is wildly entertaining. The first half an hour of that movie is, I dare say, some of the most entertaining sci-fi action adventure cinema ever. And I think it was really hurt by its advertising campaign. Here is a movie that should have appealed to any gamer, which is most of the young population of the planet Earth. And they never leaned into that. They never told you what that movie was, and that trailer, those first trailers were just did not do the film justice. And that was a film that deserved to do a lot better at the box office.
Yeah, and I hope, although it's looking less and less likely. I mean, it looked for a while like a sequel to that was automatic. And they were talking about setting up schedules. And the only reason it didn't get made already, they were ready to move on it. And they called Emily Blunt, Tom Cruise, and who directed?
Doug Liman.
Doug Liman. They contacted Emily Blunt saying, hey, we think we've got a window of time here to shoot this movie. Can you do it? And she was like, guys, I'm shooting Mary Poppins. I can't do it. So they delayed it. And the more it gets delayed, it's looking less and less likely it's going to happen, which sucks because I want a sequel to that movie. Anyway, Bike Man writes, about to end in the most northern point of Africa after cycling from the most southern point. Oh my God, dude, that is insane. Not watched a single movie from 2019. Can't wait to catch up. First of all, fuck you for making us all look bad, Bike Man. Fuck you for making us all look bad. That is insane. That is some Iron Man shit right there, dude. Well done. And listen, all I can say to you, brother, is that, man, are you in for a treat. You got so many great films lined up for yourself to watch, dude. You are in for a treat, so well done, sir. All right, Ben Rayner writes, after watching the Oscars, I want the Ford v Ferrari versus Farrell. It was a joke by Farrell. Oh, yeah, that's right. He goes, I was edited out of the film. That was a funny bit. It was a joke by Farrell, if you don't remember. I demand that Farrell cut a Ford v Ferrari, again, referencing Farrell's joke. Hashtag release the Farrell cut. Again, another situation where I really enjoyed the fact that Julia Reese-Dreyfus and Will Ferrell poking fun at editorial saying, I hate editors because they always cut me out of the movies that I'm supposed to be in. And he said, for instance, Ford v Ferrari was Ford v Ferrari v Ferrell. I thought it was kind of funny. But anyway, but the question, though, Rob, brings up a really interesting thing, which I don't know that Ben was intending or not. But man, are we hopefully now over the whole release the whoever's cut? Whether it was the Snyder or the JJ or the Edwin or the whatever, like, I'm finally starting to feel like that whole thing is dying down, because it felt like for a couple of months, it felt like as soon as somebody didn't like something about a movie, it's like demanding a different cut of it. Are we finally moving past that? Do you feel like we're moving past it?
I would hope so. But, I get it. I get if people were let down by something, and let's face it, I thought Justice League was a big letdown. I would love to see a different version of it, because clearly, judging even by the trailers, there was a lot of movie there that we didn't get to see. And I really would like to see the movie that was there, because for all of Batman v Superman's faults, the extended cut, the Ultimate Edition, it does cast a spell. There's this painterly, mythic quality to that movie, despite all the weird gobbledygook and the Martha this and Martha that. But there's something about that film that I enjoy. And I miss it, John. So when people say release the Snyder Cut, I get where they're coming from. But what people don't understand is making movies is an iterative process. You're constantly changing things up until the last minute. And for the most part, unless the studio comes in and says, nope, it's got to be a half an hour shorter, I would like somebody to go back and release the original cut of Superman Returns. That was a half an hour longer that I saw at the Friends and Family screening that I loved, that I thought was far better than what got released. But they're never going to do that. But it was something the studio mandated. They had to take a half an hour out of the movie, and it happens a lot. It happens a lot. And I get it I understand what people want, but I don't think people understand the process enough to know how what they're asking for is next to impossible.
You know what it reminds me of? And this might be taking us down a rabbit trail, but this is what it reminds me of. We as a culture and as individuals have become more and more the world revolves around me. And sociologist Tony Campolo, he told a great story once. Because if you want to understand the difference in mindset of people today versus people of, say, a different era, he said, when I was a kid, because Campolo's in his 70s now, I think. He said, when I was a kid, my mother told me what time dinner was. And it was real simple. If she tells me dinner's at 6, if I'm home at 6, I eat. If I'm not home at 6, I don't eat. It's just that simple. And when you got home for dinner, if it was chicken, if you're going to eat the chicken, then you eat. If you didn't want the chicken, you don't eat. It was just that simple. He said, today, what do we have? We have parents conferring with their children. Oh, when's good for you to have dinner? Oh, 6 isn't good for you? Okay, we can do 6:30. And, oh, you don't want broccoli? Okay, we'll tailor it to you. So he says, and that is just, he says, that's not the cause. That's just a reflection of the way we as people have now evolved to, we think everything needs to be tailored to us. And it feels like and I include myself in this, I'm as guilty as this as anybody, where we go, oh, I didn't like that movie the way it was. Give me another version of it that's more to my liking.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of, I think, indicative of the spoiled baby ass wipe generation that we are. And I'm including myself in that. I think I'm terribly guilty of that as anybody, but it's just kind of interesting. Anyway, that being said, let's move on because we're already way behind because I spent too much time on that. Anyway, CAP writes, my opinion, personally, I think it would be cool for Warner Brothers to do a Green Arrow trilogy, similar in tone to the Dark Knight trilogy, but also not be a carbon copy of it. Thoughts? And would you wait to do something like this out of respect for Stephen Amell? Stephen Amell has nothing to do with it. Warner Brothers owes no respect to Stephen Amell. It's their character. They can do whatever they want. I love Stephen Amell. Everybody knows that, but it's not about Stephen Amell. You do what you want with your character. Look, it's all about whether it's executed. You could do any character. For hell's sake, they made a movie about one of the stupidest characters in the history of conception, Ant-Man, and they made it awesome. And they did awesome things with him, a comic book. But when you think about it, the concept of Ant-Man, a guy who just gets really small, what a stupid idea. But it was executed beautifully in comic book stories, and they executed it beautifully. So it's not really about the concept. So in general, I really like the Oliver Queen character. If they decided to do that, that would be cool. But just doing it doesn't mean it'll be good. It's all about execution. But I'd be down for it. All right, Nerd Errant writes, Harley went non-lethal. We're going into not going to go. Well, I guess that's kind of from the trailer, so it's not spoilerish. Harley went non-lethal to the Gotham PD as a pragmatic move. Remember that major plot point in Birds of Prey was that all of her enemies were now after her. Imagine how worse it would be by turning into a cop killer. That's not an excuse. That's not an excuse. You know why? Because she is already an escapee of a top security federal penitentiary. She should be number one on the most wanted list already. That's another one of the problems with Birds of Prey. But you can't go any higher up. She's an escapee, most wanted from the federal security thing, and she's just walking around town, going to nightclubs, whatever. So that does logically. That doesn't work. Logically, that doesn't work to me. All right, Seth L. writes, I coached a 16U travel baseball team. Well, first of all, thank you for coaching. That's awesome. More people should coach. Anyway, and with their parental consent, I sat them down to watch Whiplash. After the movie, they all wrote good job in the bills of their hats. And when they messed up, they yelled, not my tempo. Amazing how powerful a film can be. Dude, listen. We all know film can be very powerful, but I think even the most hardcore of us underestimate how powerful and influential movies can be with us. And I think that's a great use of that. I remember, look, some of my teachers used movies just as a lazy way for them not to have to plan a lesson plan for the day. But sometimes our teachers, they would bring in a movie in the day that really did speak to us and speak to something that they were trying to get across. And I always thought that was valuable, and good on you, Seth, for using that tool. All right, Jonathan writes, I really appreciate the Hunt's marketing. In an age where people are sensitive as hell, it's good that Blumhouse has the courage to put the movie back on schedule, and it also acknowledged the controversy surrounding it. as the years go by and people become more sensitive to supposed agendas being made by Hollywood, I wish studios would do what Blumhouse did and have the balls to ignore the BS and make whatever movie they want. However you think the studio should handle controversies on their films while still being respectful. Well, Jonathan, to be fair, and Rob, I don't know how you feel about this, but and I've had Jason Blum in my studio before. I love the dude. I love what they do. But let's be fair. It's not, the primary thing here is not balls. The primary thing here is greed, which makes business work. They want the money that they can make by putting this out. If they weren't going to lose a single penny, if somebody was going to come along and say, hey, Jason Blum, here's all the money you had already spent on this movie. Here's it all back with 10% extra. Just don't release the film. They go, cool, and they wouldn't release the film. I mean, this is about them making money, but it also has some fortitude. I don't know, Rob, how do you see that?
Well, it is about, look, I think this movie, it's probably pretty good. You know, the Blumhouse model has
it looks good.
I think it looks pretty good. So I think it's a zeitgeist movie. Certainly they've learned from things like The Purge. These kinds of movies are going to make money. If human beings are known for one thing, it's their bloodlust, you know, and watching a political satire where people are hunting other people, you know, it's just a variation on a story that's being told for years, a century now. And to add a little political satire into it, so much the better. And I think that, hey, why not? And, you know, I've never believed that being exposed to stories, even if the subject matter is incendiary, is ever a bad thing. Because after all, it is just a story. You know, it's just a movie. I remember, I mean, I was old enough to remember, like, when The Warriors came out, people were like, oh my God, because it was like gang violence in Philadelphia or wherever, Chicago. You know, you shouldn't have made this movie. And now you look at The Warriors and it's almost a fantasy film because of the way gangs are depicted compared to now. I mean, no one even has a gun in that movie. And when they do have guns, it's shown as being like sacrilegious. So I don't see, look, I'm looking forward to this movie unapologetically. I want to see some people die. I want to see some great kills. I want to I want to chuckle at the political satire. I want to have a great time at the movies. And I'm glad it's getting released. And I'm glad that, you know, it's not being suppressed.
And I think it looks like a lot of fun. So we'll see how it is. All right. Ryan Lohner writes, I just watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Nice. And holy crap, every 10 seconds I was thinking, how the hell did they do this with 80s tech? Yeah. Also, around 90% of Bob Hoskins' performance is against thin air, but he's always completely in every scene. Here's the thing, Ryan and Rob, listen, Bob Hoskins is an actor who simply doesn't get enough recognition since his passing. I mean, whether he's Mr. Smee in one of my most beloved films, Hook, of course, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He was also wonderful in that one with the actor from, why am I freezing on, the actor from Shakespeare in Love, Ray Fiennes' brother, Joseph Fiennes. Joseph Fiennes, and I think it was the one where he was the Russian sniper. And anyway, Bob Hoskins was one of the Soviet. It's not Enemy at the Gates, is it? Or is it Enemy at the Gates?
Yeah,
Enemy at the Gates, okay.
Jude Law's in there too.
And Jude Law's in there, that's right. So Enemy at the Gates, and Bob Hoskins was like Stalin's right-hand man in it, and kept referring to Stalin as the boss. I mean, it's actually a remarkable performance, and he's in a ton of other stuff. But
and let's not forget his star turn in Super Mario Brothers.
Well, of course, as he is the definitive Mario. He's the definitive, but honestly, seriously, dude, he even did a Jet Li film. For heaven's sakes. But I really feel, or was it Jet Li? Yeah, I think it was Jet Li. I really feel he is an actor that we don't, and I'm guilty of this, that we don't talk about him as enough, because he was incredible.
Oh, he was, I mean, the movies he made, like with Neil Jordan, right? With Mike Mona Lisa was one, and The Long Good Friday. And he, you know, they recently put out Cotton Club Encore, Coppola's restoration of Cotton Club. He's great in that. He's had a really interesting career. I mean, he was in Pink Floyd The Wall. By the way, where's that Blu-ray? He was in Brazil.
Oh, yeah. All right, let's keep moving here. Optimus Prime writes, John Campea, you will slash your neighbor's tires, eat ketchup and eggs, and watch the 80s Transformers movie on loop for a week. P.S. Of the 4 Transformers sequels, which was the least bad that you would rewatch if you were forced to pick one to watch again? Yeah, I hated all of the sequels. But if I had to pick one that was the least egregious, I would say the one with the battle in Chicago, which is one that I think you actually like that. That's Dark of the Moon, right? That's the one that Leonard Nimoy did one of the voices, right?
Dark of the Moon rules, and the Battle of Chicago is awesome. I mean, if you want to, I mean, come on, there's the visual effects on display in that movie, and then you had dudes really in those flying suits flying through the skies of Chicago. Because why not?
Because why not?
And the moon landing is celebrated. Yes, we did land on the moon, because we had to go find the Transformers crashed there.
I mean, obviously. So I think that's the one that I would probably lean towards. All right, Joe Hill writes, damn it, John, you were right. I wrote in a few weeks ago that I wasn't sure I could get into Lucifer. Here I am in the middle of season 3, and I can't turn it off. I think people are starting to wonder why I keep inexplicably yelling, detective! Or Detective Douche is one of my favorite lines in that. By the way, the guy who plays Detective Douche, or the character's name is Dan in Lucifer. I had the privilege yesterday of going to a first screening of a new movie that Aaron Cummings is in. It's this little indie film called Language Arts. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. But anyway, Detective Douche from Lucifer, Dan, makes an appearance in the film. So that was kind of cool seeing that. And listen, yeah, Lucifer. I'm all about Lucifer, man. I love that show. That show's incredible. Anna and I were just talking again last night. It's like, when is it coming back? I'm so excited. And of course, our own Aaron Cummings is in the next season of Lucifer. So we're all very excited about that. But I'm glad you enjoyed it, Joe. Keep enjoying it, dude. Keep enjoying it. All right. LJ writes, hey guys, have you seen the Danish film The Hunt from 2012 with Mads Mikkelsen? Mads is incredible in the film and won Best Actor at Cannes. I don't know that I remember that one off the top of my head. Rob, have you?
Yeah, I own it. I have the Blu-ray of that as well, and it's pretty rough. It's a pretty rough movie. It deals with some difficult issues, but yeah, Mads Mikkelsen is one of my favorite actors working today. I mean, I'll watch anything he was in. The Nicholas Winding Refn film, of course James Bond is Le Chiffre, and Brian Fuller's Hannibal. I mean, he might be even a better Hannibal than Anthony Hopkins. I know that's probably sacrilege to say, but
they were very different Hannibals, right? They're very, very different characters in those two. Yeah, he's great though. He's great. Okay, let's see here. LJ writes, saw Birds of Prey. It was fine. Narration was overdone too much for me. To me, this was an example of a movie being R-rated just for the sake of it. Could have easily made PG-13 with a few changes, and that may have had a slight effect on the box office. I don't disagree, LJ. Birds of Prey is a movie that very easily could have been PG-13. Because listen, the stuff that you got to most worry about is nudity and sexual stuff. There's none of that in the movie. So, and really a lot of the violence you can get away with on broadcast TV today. So maybe drop 1 or 2 of the F-bombs. And this is a movie that without any effect very easily could have slid into the PG-13 thing. I think you're right. I don't know this for sure. I'm just saying I agree with you that I feel like they just made it R just so they could say it was rated R. Look cool. Look, kids, look how cool we are. We're R. Ooh, we're edgy. It didn't need to be R when you I walked out of the film saying there's very little in that stuff that needed R. So I agree with you, LJ. Right. Dude Man Bro writes, I love the Final Destination movie series. My favorite horror franchises. I love how they don't have to rely on jump scares to send chills down your spine and keep you guessing. And the recurrent theme about death is thought-provoking for me, at least. I was never a big fan of the franchise. There was one, I think it was the 3rd or the 4th one, I can't remember, that I actually did quite enjoy, but I myself was not the biggest fan of the franchise. But you're right, it is at least a little horror films that don't rely on jump scares. Rob, were you much into those films at all?
Dude, I love like the inciting incidents. You know, some of those films. I don't know if it's 3. There's a highway disaster. You know, this huge crash on the highway. The kills in those movies.
Things are going through the windows and everything.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you watch horror movies like that for the kills, and I have to say they've always delivered, and they're fun. I mean,
they're always fun.
They're always fun. You know, I don't know. I want to know, like, where death, like kind of like in the movie The Ring, where are all these supernatural entities hanging out, waiting to come after these people? Like, if you thwart death, is there some some lounge that Death is waiting around in to go, oh, these people thwarted me. It's time to go back to Earth and
time to get them back
and wreck some shop. But yes, I love the Final Destination movies. I really do.
All right, next one up. Dude Man Bro follows that up with Final Destination 3 is my favorite. That might be the one that I liked. I can't remember. Because the two main leads have good chemistry and are great horror protagonists. And it also has one of my favorite comedic lines in horror movies, F you, Ben Franklin. I don't remember. It's been a number of years since I've seen it, so I don't remember it. But listen, that was the thing I will say for the Final Destination franchise is that it was a franchise that never cost a lot of money. And they always knew they could rely on X amount of box office. You know what I mean? So as long as you kept doing right, I wouldn't be surprised to see them keep going with that, dude, man. I really wouldn't. All right, Luke1234 writes, were you also a tech guy? Sorry, I'm going to try that again. Were you also a tech guy, or did the evolution of your job force you to become one? No, I've been really obsessed with computers and tech and stuff like that for a long time. That's why, like, one of my very first jobs was as a web developer. I was a web developer. I did a lot of stuff with that. I was always tinkering with new tech and gear, which is kind of why I was like the first movie podcast out there, because I got into the technology of it and getting the gear. And then I was one of the first to do an online movie video show online even before YouTube was around. And then, of course, I worked with the visual effects company for a while, and I actually did a little bit of where I even produced a couple commercials on my own. Even though I was mostly a client services guy, when the company would get really busy, I would have to actually step in and do some compositing work and actually produce some of the commercials myself. Like, we would get hired to do some like little commercials, but we were also working on major motion pictures at the same time. So our real artists would go and work on that and then say, Campea, do this commercial for SaskTel. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing this telephone company commercial on all my own. So, but I've always been obsessed with that stuff, and it has served me well as I've moved into this stuff, because it's just kind of a continuation of what I like to do. Luke1234 also writes, what was the worst Canadian storm you remember? I was in Kingston, Ontario. I was around Kingston, Ontario, an area known as Big Rideau. And we had this ice storm. It had to be in the late 1990s. There was this major ice storm where like all the power cables like were covered with like this thick of ice on even all the cables, the houses, the roads, everything was just covered in ice. It was like something I'd never seen before and I'd never seen since. Connie writes, love 1917, though I'm not sure I can ever watch it again. Had no idea Dean Charles Chapman, who plays Lance Corporal Blake in the film, is Tommen Baratheon from Game of Thrones. Mind blown. Well, listen, there's a lot of people in that like all these big surprises other than Benedict Cumberbatch, who they show in one trailer, Rob. There are a lot of people in this movie that are like big surprise appearances. And I don't want to give any of the names away, but the last one is the one that got me the most. When the hero kind of meets the guy he's kind of looking for, and you're like, oh my God, look who they got. But all the way through, they had people popping up in this. Was there one, without naming the name, but that those of us who have seen 1917 would know what you're talking about? Is there one that really stood out to you?
No, because once you know what they're doing, it's more like, I
you
wonder who's
going to expect it.
Yeah. You know,
right.
and I think that's kind of a tradition. Like even in Saving Private Ryan, there were people that like, oh my God, look who's here. You know, they'd meet people along the way, and I think
true.
that's kind of a neat thing to do. You know, I mean, I like that, and I like the fact that actors are willing to come in and play those parts.
Yeah,
you know, I love that. I do love that very much. So I thought that was a great. That was something to really like about the movie. And
what actor isn't going to answer the phone when Sam Mendes is calling them?
Right, so, right.
Yeah. You take that call. All right.
I mean, it's like an Ad Astra when Natasha Lyonne just shows up, you know, like on Mars. What? You know, I love that.
All right. Next up, Murray Reich writes, what are the chances that Sonic movie has a Rogue the Bat? What are the chances that the Sonic movie has a Rogue the Bat cameo? Definitely the sexist Sonic character has big boobs. Also, my left arm and hand feel numb. Now, what should I do? I'm honestly, I'm not well enough into the thing to understand, so I have no guess. Sorry about that, Murray. I'm the wrong guy to ask. All right. James L.H. writes, Hey, John, one of two. You've talked about sound from a question. Have you seen a recent documentary called Making Waves, The Art of Cinema Sound? Really fascinating with Walter Murch, Ben Burt, the icon Ben Burt, Gary Rydstrom, Spielberg, Lucas, Redford, Ang Lee, Streisand, Nolan, and more. I have not. It was interesting when they used an image in the shape of an orchestra to show the different areas that make up sound. There's also a brief image when talking to Ben Burt of his sound map for Star Wars of LA, which was a Star Wars fan throughout. Pretty cool. Okay, I'm not quite sure where you're going with that, James, but no, I have not even heard of this movie, Making Waves, The Art of Cinema. But as somebody who has been obsessed with the work of Ben Burt, particularly like followed the stuff that he did with the Star Wars all the way through the prequels, from the original films to the prequels, that sounds fascinating to me, Rob. Have you heard of this documentary? Have you seen it? What are your thoughts?
It's really, really good, actually. And it's streaming. You can see it streaming. And, I think that sound design never gets enough. You can't learn enough about it because there's science behind it. There's creativity and artistry behind it. And there's technology behind it. And I really love that. And movie sound started to take really leaps forward in terms of sound design and editing with Star Wars, which is one of the first Dolby, or maybe it is the first Dolby stereo film. But so anybody who loves big fantasy epics or large movies like Apocalypse Now, it's a documentary you will love.
All right, next up, we got James L.H. who writes, John, here's a different list for you. Some of my favorites from when I was born in 1973, The Exorcist, Don't Look Now, American Graffiti, The Sting. Wow, those movies all came out in the same year. Serpico, Enter the Dragon, Live and Let Die, Magnum Force, Day of the Jackal, High Plains Drifter, Mean Streets, Badlands, and The Three Musketeers. Man, those all came out in 73? That's a hell of a list. Yeah. You know, it's funny. A lot of people have not seen Serpico. And because I've talked to a bunch of, I think a lot of the films on this list, a lot of people are familiar with The Exorcist, American Graffiti. Of course, that's George Lucas pre-Star Wars, stuff like that. But I think a lot of people haven't seen Serpico. If there was one on that list, Rob, which is the one that you think most people, they had to make sure that they saw? Like out of Exorcist, Don't Look Now, American Graffiti. Well, let's assume most people have seen The Exorcist. The Sting, Enter the Dragon. Which one would you recommend?
Well, I'm a huge fan of Nicholas Roeg's Don't Look Now. It's Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie. It's a horror movie. It's a ghost story, and it's Venice. I think it's set in Venice. It's when I was younger, it was one of the scariest movies I'd ever seen. I mean, it's really unsettling. And of course, obviously I love The Exorcist, but The Sting is great. The Sting is George Roy Hill's movie, which he also directed Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and he directed Slaughterhouse-5, and he directed World According to Garp. And I'm a huge fan of that film. It's so much fun to watch. But then, like you said, Serpico, how can you not see Serpico? If you like, dude, I love my cop thrillers. I love movies about cops. That's based on a true story, gritty New York cop drama, starring Al Pacino. You can't go wrong.
All right. Next up, we got Brian Meadows, who sends in a $50 tip. And so, Brian, thank you so much. When on the rare occasion that somebody sends in a donation that big to support the channel, not only do we answer the question, but we'll answer it in its own standalone video in a week or two as well. So keep your eyes open for that. But let's get to Brian's question. Brian writes, I get annoyed by celebrities, especially during the Oscars, focusing on talking about inclusion of women. This feels condescending after a while, and I stop caring, even though I agree to an extent. Do you get annoyed as well when you hear these speeches? Well, I mean, here's my thoughts on this, Rob. On my show, look, if I had my preference, I would prefer leaving politics out of just about everything that has to do with entertainment. On this show, of course, like every other human being, I have my own political beliefs, but here we are all film fans. Here we are here to talk about movies. We're talking about the things that unite us. We're talking about the things that we all love and enjoy, movies, blah, blah. So we leave politics out of this show. That's just my choice. Would I prefer that in something like the Oscars? Yes, I would prefer it. But at the same time, I don't begrudge anybody who really believes in something, that if they have an opportunity and a platform to say something that is important to them, whether it's Marlon Brando talking about the issues that he did and refusing to accept his Academy Award, or whether it's today, I don't begrudge anybody at the biggest moment of their professional careers. If there's something that's really important to them and they want to say it, let them say it. And guess what? Just because it's not something I necessarily want to hear, I'm enough of a big boy that I can handle it. I can handle it if somebody wants to say something that is special to them. Whether it's annoying to me or not, doesn't matter. That's their moment. If they want to say something, let them say something. I will say this. This is as a political thing you'll hear me say, Brian, about it feeling condescending after a while, maybe. But here's the thing. If I was being pinned down to the ground and being punched in the balls repeatedly, and in the process of being pinned to the ground and being punched in the balls, for whatever reason, I was also doing some good things that people wanted to interview me for, I would probably bring up the issue of, I think people should stop punching me in the balls. I think people should stop punching me in the balls. Now, you can say it's all well and good for somebody else to go, oh, John, we're so tired of hearing you say you don't want to be punched in the balls anymore. Well, that's easy for you to say. You're not the one being punched in the balls. I'm being punched in the balls every day, 50 times a day. I would like it to stop. I think it's important that it stop. See, it's easy for somebody else to be annoyed by the fact that I'm talking about the fact that I'm getting punched in the balls because they're not in my shoes. They're not getting punched in the balls. I think more of us men need to understand, as much as we like to deny it, that women have been kept in their place for a long time in this industry. There's been a very defined little box that Hollywood has tried to keep women in for a long, long time. So while it is not my issue, and while it is not something I can really relate with, I'm not the one being punched in the balls. So if there are women in the industry who feel like they want to talk about breaking the glass ceiling and breaking down some walls, and they want to talk about that, more power to them. And guess what? I'm a big enough boy that it doesn't make my spine turn to jelly. Oh no, I can't hear women talking about things that don't thing to me. I'm big enough. I can handle it. And I don't begrudge them talking about an issue that's important to them. So I don't know. I mean, I get it. I would prefer politics to be left out of everything that's entertainment related personally, but I also understand where people like that are being are talking about, because I'm not the one getting kicked in the balls. But Rob, you have anything you want to add to that or mention there?
Well, I mean, one of the things I've always enjoyed politics, like, you know, you watch a movie like Gladiator and you had the push and pull between a Caesar and, say, the Roman Senate. Right. And I think the political power structure of the world has always been something that's been interesting to me. And I like dealing with politics on a larger scale. I think what we really have to stay away from necessarily on a channel like this is personal politics. Because when you start espousing your own personal politics, there are people that might not believe in your personal politics, and then the message of this channel gets muddled, which is we're supposed to be celebrating movies and movie news and entertainment and all the good stuff that we love, as you say, every morning. And I think politics sort of pulls us off message. Although I do love very political movies. I do love movies about governments and whether it's All the President's Men or things like that, or even Bombshell that just recently came out is a very political film. And I like that. I think that's good when movies delve into political issues, because, again, it's a forum where you get to sit down, whether you agree with it or not, you watch a movie, and a movie is sort of what I love about movies, John. We all walk into a movie theater with all of our different points of view. The lights come down, and we don't pay attention to each other, and we watch the ideas that are presented on the screen. And I think that's really powerful. It's really interesting, and that's what we celebrate here.
Well said. And again, Brian, listen, thank you so much for supporting the channel at that level, and keep your eyes open over the next couple of weeks to see your question also get turned into its own standalone video. So thanks for that, man. All right. 50 Shades of Geek writes, the visual effects wasn't the problem with Cats. It was everything else in the movie. The VFX were the best thing about the movie. There are people who would disagree with you about that, but clearly it wasn't the only problem. There were a lot of problems with Cats, but I don't think at all the message, the joke at the Oscars ever even remotely implied that the only problem with Cats was, I don't believe that was part of it at all. 50 Shades also writes, I know what Tom Cruise's next stunt is going to be. He's going to bungee jump from a jet fighter mid-flight into an active volcano filled with rabid sharks and alligators while watching Cats as Doolittle and Doolittle at the same time. Oh, that was another winner of a film. Rob, did you ever get around to watching Doolittle?
No.
Yeah,
I definitely will try and catch up with it when it's streaming, because my favorite thing, John, I think in the world is either taking long airplane flights. When I went to New York, I was able to catch up with like Angel Has Fallen. Oh, because I really like these. I like that franchise, but and I love catching up with movies I haven't seen, even the bad ones, because it's that's what I love about streaming and long airplane flights, because you can watch movies and there's no judgment.
No judgment. Nobody's standing around judging you. All right. 50 Shades also writes, by the way, John, did you get a new chair? How's your house? Okay, that came out goes the wrong way. I have not yet, only because I'm still sitting on this crappy 10-year-old chair that is completely uncomfortable, bad for my back and everything. But it's only because I simply have not had the time to go out and get it. So Fact Checker Jonathan and I are, because Fact Checker Jonathan is also working on editing the film I'm working on at this computer. So Fact Checker Jonathan and I are going to go, since he's got to sit in it too, I thought it would be good if he had a say in what chair I'm going to get. So we're going to go out and do some chair shopping this week. So hopefully I'm going to get a new chair soon. All right, Patrick
Get one
Conway
of those
writes,
high back gaming chairs, dude.
Yeah, I think so. This got good back support and all that kind of stuff.
Man.
Yeah,
and they look cool. They look cool.
And they look good. I got to get myself one of those.
One.
All right, Patrick Conway writes, Mission Impossible 7 will have a Concorde jet chase and crash stunts and end with cliffhanger, and M8 will a flooding sub stuck in Titanic's wreckage. Space is too far. It's just so funny that we, like, when we look at what Tom Cruise has done, and then we hear Christopher McQuarrie say, he's planning 3 new stunts that scare me and are obscenely dumb. Like, just crazy. It's just crazy, Patrick, because you say stuff like that, but you might be right. That's the funny thing. You could be right. All right, Meister 25 writes, Endgame could have easily provided competition in best film editing or sound. To me, that's always been their ace. Look no further than Winter Soldier. Again, I don't know that they should have gotten nominations for those categories, but Rob, I do agree that had Endgame been announced as one of the nominees in editing and announced as one of the nominees in sound, I would have had no issue with that. I would have thought, yeah, I can see that. Like, I don't sit here and I don't look at any of them on the list and go, oh, you should have taken that one off the list for Endgame. But at the same time, if it had been in there, I wouldn't have batted an eye. I would have thought that would have been totally fine if they did. I don't think it would have won in either category, but I agree with that. All right, Murray Reich writes, still no critic review as of Wednesday morning for Sonic and Fantasy Island. Yikes. That's... Wait a second. Today's not Wednesday, is it? Today's Tuesday, isn't it?
No, today is Wednesday. Bro.
Man,
it's Hump Day. It's Surprise Day if you're a Mickey Mouse Club fan.
I lose track of time. You know what, Murray? You're not wrong. That's never a good sign. What we've learned in the last year or so, Rob, it's not always a terrible sign. It's not always a terrible sign that you get to within about 24 hours of a movie coming out and reviews not being released yet. But it's never a good sign. Never a good sign. So
it would bum me out if Fantasy Island isn't good.
It looks so good.
I love the off the wall, like somebody looked at Fantasy Island and like, yeah, let's make it, because there were always dark episodes of Fantasy Island. They decided to go way dark. I mean, I hope it's like Cabin in the Woods and there's some giant Cthulhu-like monster that's manipulating everybody that lives on that island.
Yeah, very much. Hey, listen, guys. It's past 10:30. Robert's got other things he needs to do, so we're going to let him go at this point, quit monopolizing all of his time. Robert, again, it's always a pleasure having you here, man. Where can people find you and all of your goodness online?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, find me on Instagram at my own name, Robert Meyer Burnett, or find me on my own YouTube channel, The Burnett Work, and my show, Robservations, the show about something.
All right, dude. Thanks a lot for being here, and I'll call you later today because we got some stuff we need to go over. All right, dude. Have a great one, man. I'll talk to you soon. All right, guys, that was the great and wonderful and all-powerful Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Make sure you guys check out his other stuff online. But we've got a few more minutes here, so let's rapid fire through the rest of these questions. Let's see if we can get through all of them here. 50 Shades of Geek writes, I've been thinking about what you said last week regarding Conroy and Hamill being my favorite Batman and Joker. You said it might just be my love for the characters more than the actors. I disagree. The way the characters are written is definitely a part of it, but without their voices, the characters don't work for me. They are my favorite, not because I love the show. I love them because they are the best. I don't care that they only do half the work. As you say, character is character. True, but character comes from the writing. And then the actors give manifestation to it. In the case of the animated Batman series, 50% of giving manifestation to the characters are the animators, not the actors. And by the way, listen, don't take that as me giving any sort of criticism. By the way, I guess I can take the headphones off now since Robert's not here. Don't interpret that as me giving any sort of criticism to voice actors. If you guys have watched me for any period of time, I have been an advocate for the profession of voice actors and why voice actors are underappreciated. And I don't like the habit that Hollywood has of just casting famous names to be the voices in their animated shows, in their animated movies, when they really should just go out and get really good voice trained actors. There's definitely high value in that. But, you know, when it comes to the character, a lot of it's dialogue, it's the story, and then where normally an actor comes in and then manifests those things. In the case of these things like Conroy's Batman, Hamill's Joker, they're only manifesting part of it. Like the other is the animation, the animators, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I still kind of see it that way. And I love that Batman animated series. I love that. And I love Conroy's voice, and I love Hamill's Joker and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that's just kind of how I see it. All right, 50 Shades also writes, I fully respect what the live action actors are doing, but to me, Hamill and Conroy can't be beat. They are the voices I hear when I read them in comics. I don't look at live action versus voice acting. To me, it's a performance as a performance. That's not true. You cannot take away from the physicality of a performance. You just can't. You can't take that out and say any performance is any performance. That's not true. And that's not to say that vocal performances aren't stellar. Absolutely they can be. But you can't just say a performance is a performance. You cannot take out, like Daniel Day-Lewis acting in the first act of There Will Be Blood, almost entirely physically. You can't just take that out and say a performance is a performance. That's not true. That's simply not true. It's the literal fact. The performance is two things, the vocalization of it and the physicality of it. There are two things. You literally cannot take away half of that equation and just say a performance is a performance. It's just not true. It's just not true. Live action acting and voice acting are very specific things. And that's why I think vocal actors and voice professionals don't get enough credit, because they're just seen as, no. It's a very unique skill that they do better than most Hollywood people. That's why I want to hear professional voice actors voicing most of my animated movies, not just some Hollywood actor with a name. But at the same time, what the Hollywood actors do on screen physically is a different thing, just like that is. So I don't believe you can just take away half of it and say it's the same thing. It's just not. Anyway, John Martin writes, John, love the little bit of your doc you put on Twitter. When and where will you do you see it releasing? Well, thank you so much for that. What happened was I put together this little 1 minute thing. It's not even a trailer. You don't see any names. You don't see the name of the movie on it. You don't see it. I put together this little 1 minute thing. And the reason I put together the 1 minute thing was, so as I'm reaching out to other people, I wanted to include that little 1 minute thing so they saw because look, I'm a nobody. Nobody knows who John Campea is. I'm a fucking nobody. So I wanted to include a 1 little minute thing so they see I'm not just some Yahoo YouTuber. I'm doing a documentary, which is exactly what I sound like. But rather see, look, I got some legitimate people in here. We're taking this seriously, and I wanted to include that. And I put that on YouTube the night before, and I accidentally set it to public instead of unlisted. So a bunch of people saw it, I took it down, and then a bunch of people said, well, look, a bunch of people already saw it, and it can't hurt to have it up there, so why not just put it back up? So I tightened it up a little bit, and I put it back up. I don't know when it's going to... Right now, my goal, and it could be completely unrealistic, but my goal right now is to do a screening of the film, at Comic-Con this summer in July. I think that might be very unrealistic on my part, but that is at least what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming to have a cut of the movie done, because I'm going to be done my interviews by the end of April. So that gives me May, June, and July to get a cut of the movie together to show at Comic-Con. So that's my goal. I don't know. I think that might be, like I said, delusions of grandeur, but we're hoping. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But anyway, thank you for the kind words, John. I appreciate that. DJ Riley writes, had a great birthday. Went to see Birds of Prey for the third time, but at the Disney Springs AMC Dine-In movie theater. I love AMC Dine-In theaters. I really do. Movie still gets a 6 out of 10 for me. Also, John, I think you should watch How I Met Your Mother. All-time favorite TV show for me. Thanks. Nah. I have no interest to watch it. There's so much TV that I want to watch that I don't have time to watch. How I Met Your Mother is a show that I watched a couple of episodes of and it didn't really click for me. So I'm not saying anything bad about the show at all, but I watched a couple episodes, didn't click for me. It very well could be great, but I've just got so much other TV, and you guys know I don't have a lot of time to watch TV. So I have very, 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 very limited time for television. So I'm going to keep it for the stuff that I know I'm really interested in. So anyway, there's that. But I've heard a lot of people love How I Met Your Mother, DJ. A lot of people love that. Anyway, Matthew Deedman writes, hey, John, greetings from the UK. This is the first time I've sent in a question to the show. Well, thank you for sending it in, man. And I just wanted to ask if you have seen the trailer for The French Dispatch. I love everything Wes Anderson does, and I can't wait to see the movie. Any thoughts? Yeah, we actually talked about it as one of our topics off the top of the show. It was actually topic number 1 or number 2 today, so you can go back and watch a fuller discussion that me and Rob had about that. I thought it was quite good. I think a part of the reason why I'm excited about it is just because it's Wes Anderson and his cast. I don't know how I would feel about the trailer on its own if it wasn't Wes Anderson, but the fact of the matter is I do know it's a Wes Anderson film, so that's just enough to get me excited about it. But again, for a more full discussion about it, Matthew, you can go back to the beginning of the show. It's one of the first main topics we talk about off the top. Thanks for sending that in, man. All right, ARN writes, please watch Portrait of a Lady on Fire. So good. I've seen it. We've talked about it on this show. Excellent, excellent, excellent film, and a very different kind of a film as well. You know, period piece. The art of it is incredible. All that kind of stuff. Wonderful film. All right, Sam Fisher writes, Wes Anderson is one of my favorite directors. You're not alone, Sam. There's a lot of people that consider Wes to be one of their all-time favorite directors. Absolutely, you're not alone. Breston Buckner writes, if they do a sequel to Joker, which I don't think they should, I think it'd be cool if he never leaves Arkham. Do a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest type movie. That could be an interesting approach. Actually, that could be a really interesting approach. I hadn't even thought of that. That's not a bad idea. Now, look, I'm with you, Breston. You guys know, I love Joker. I do not think they should do a sequel. I think doing a sequel undermines the original because of the nature of the film. That said, they're going to do one. I mean, you have to. Look, even I, as somebody who says you shouldn't do one, if I was in the boardroom at Warner Brothers, of course I would say, yeah, we have to make another one, though. That movie made $1 billion. We can't not make another one. So your direction, Brent, that's not a bad idea. It's one I hadn't considered. I kind of like the idea, Brenson. Well thought, sir. Well thought. All right, Tiffany Hoffman writes, I'm one of the few who loves the original Howard the Duck. Why does everybody hate on the Howard the Duck? I would be okay with a reboot. Would you? Hey, listen, if they wanted to reboot, look, I will admit, Tiffany, I am also one of the people who I'm not a big fan of Howard the Duck. I didn't think it was as bad as some people make it out to be, but it's also not a film that I actively look to go out and watch again and again. So matter of fact, I haven't watched it in at least 10 years. That said, it is such an odd and weird concept of a movie and of a character. And especially with James Gunn kind of revitalizing the popularity of him by dropping him in here and there. And by the way, Howard the Duck was in Endgame. If you look, he's there. He's in the Endgame portal scene. So there's that. I would be down for somebody taking another crack at it. I'd be down for that. I may or may not like it, but I think it would be an interesting thing to do. So maybe they might try that at some point. All right, Manny Garcia writes, on a plane to Vegas with my girlfriend. I love Vegas. I go there all the time. With my girlfriend for her birthday, and we're watching John Campea on the flight. She enjoys your honest opinions. Well, thanks so much, dude, and have a great flight to Vegas. A little word of warning. As you're descending into Vegas, there's something about the air pressure around Vegas that quite often the descent can be bumpy. And as somebody who doesn't like to fly, although turbulence usually doesn't, I hate flying, But turbulence doesn't actually bother me that much. It's kind of weird. I don't know why that is. But just warn your girlfriend in case either of you have any things. As you're descending into Vegas, there is a good chance you're going to hit some bumps because I don't know why. The air is just always like that around Vegas. But it's no big deal. Hang tight. And thank you for watching me. I guess I'm a part of your Mile High Club now. That didn't sound right. But anyway, thanks for that, Manny. And have a great time in Vegas, my friend. Hey, want to eat somewhere really fun, has some really, really good food, but is not off the borders when it comes to budget? In Planet Hollywood, there's a Gordon Ramsay restaurant called Burger. And it is, as it sounds, it's basically a burger place, but it's like really high-end burgers. And it's not terribly expensive. And it's wonderful. Their burgers are great. So if you want to feel like you're treating yourself a little bit, but not break the budget, go to Planet Hollywood, Gordon Ramsay's Burger. Ann and I love eating there. I hope you enjoy it, man. All right, Mr. Kaplan writes, what are your most anticipated horror films? I mean, we were talking about that the other day. I've never said this before, but I'm very excited about the upcoming Halloween. I'm not a big fan of the Halloween franchise, but I love the last one, so I'm really looking forward to that one. So that's the one that comes to mind right away, so there's that. All right, next up, Akamaru writes, I love the MCU, but I agree we need more diversity in comic book movies. I could never see Disney do movies like Joker or Deadpool. No, that's the thing. You know, for everybody celebrating, and I get it. Listen, in Kevin Feige, I trust. I totally do. But keep this in mind. Had Fox, the X-Men universe, been under Disney for the last 5 years, we never would have gotten Logan. Logan is a top 5 best comic book movie of all time, in my opinion. And we never would have gotten that Logan movie if X-Men and Logan and all these characters had been under Disney for the last 5 years. If the X-Men had been under Disney for the last 5 years, we never would have gotten Deadpool. Never. We never would have gotten that movie. Because that is a movie Disney never would have done. Without Fox leading the way and doing stuff like that first, it never would have happened. We just said something. That's just a great example, Akamaru, that having different studios make these movies take comic book movies into different areas than they would have gone had they just all been under Disney at the time. Hey, we would have gotten some good X-Men films. Don't get me wrong. But they never would have broke ground the way Logan broke ground. They never would have broke ground the way Deadpool broke ground. We never would have gotten X-Men Days of Future Past. That X-Men movie Days of Future Past, to me, a top 10 comic book movie of all time, but it's the type of movie that Disney never would have done. And so we have gotten some of the greatest comic book movies of all time because other people were making them. So yeah, I agree with you, man. I agree with you. All right, Akamaru also writes, even if Endgame had more than one category nomination, it had to compete with Parasite, Jojo Rabbit, 1917, Marriage Story, etc. True, and that's what even Rob said. When I put it to Rob earlier, I said, okay, let's say you're a voting member of the Academy. Do you give any of the Oscars? Forget nominations. Would you have given any of the Oscars, any of them, to Endgame? And even Robert said no. So it is a difficult thing. And this 2019 was such a good year. I mean, think about that. You guys know how much I like Endgame. And I don't put it in the top 10 films of the year. It didn't even get an honorable mention for me. That's how good of a year 2019. I think that's a good thing. All right. Jeffrey Hemphill writes, sends in a $50 super chat. Thank you so much for that, Jeffrey. I'm going to answer your question now, and then in the next couple of weeks, keep your eyes open for it to be answered again in another standalone video. All right. Jeffrey writes, The Accountant 2, oh God, I want that movie so bad, is my most wanted sequel other than National Treasure 3. Hopefully, J.K. Simmons and Cynthia Adai Robinson team up to stop Ben Affleck, but then help him out of a jam. That's a little too formulaic for me, but it's probably the way they'd go. It's his best role and should be a trilogy at minimum. Your thoughts? Listen, I don't know why more of you guys didn't go to see The Accountant when it came out. I freaking love that movie. The Accountant is so good. And the dynamic between, first of all, Ben Affleck was brilliant in it. And then the dynamic between him and John Bernthal, the story of it, how it all kind of wraps up near the end. It is a movie that is begging to be a franchise. But unfortunately, not a lot of people went to support it. And I have no idea why. It's got great action. It's got great performances. It's a really good story. It had some big names in it, including John Bernthal. It is, and you're right, JK is fabulous. It is a wonderful movie. And it seemed like it would never get a sequel because of its box office performance. But we've heard over the last couple of years, they're still trying to get that going. We know Ben Affleck has said publicly he wants to do another one. We know the director wants to do another one. We know Warner Brothers is open to the idea of doing another one. They just got to make it all come together. And I am with you, Jeffrey. I mean, more so than National Treasure 3 for me. Way more than National Treasure 3. I want an Accountant 2. And I want to see where these characters go after that. I want to see them return to that world. I love that movie, and I think it's just so ripe to be a franchise. It is rich with franchise potential. So, fingers crossed, man. Fingers crossed. You and me both, Jeffrey. Thanks for sending that in, man. All right, an anonymous viewer writes in. Piggybacking off of your Endgame being 22nd movie of a franchise, do you think one more reason they didn't win could be voters not following the franchise in its entirety and not getting / liking watching the movie itself? No, all the Academy members watched it. I mean, all the Academy members watched it. I think what might be in some of the voters' minds, might have been the idea of, you know, the Academy Awards isn't there to award other films. Your movie has to be good enough on its own to merit this. And quite frankly, as somebody who has watched all the MCU films, as somebody who loves the MCU, as somebody who has been, you know, has talked probably more about the MCU on this show than any other topic that I have, I wouldn't have nominated Endgame for Best Picture. I wouldn't have nominated any of the actors for any of the best acting categories. And I am somebody who did watch all of them and loves them all and all that kind of stuff. And I wouldn't have done it. So I don't think that's the case. And by the way, your movie needs to be good enough on its own. You can't give it an award for what it represents over 20 plus films. It's got to stand on its own. That's why Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring didn't win Best Picture. Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers didn't win Best Picture, but they were both nominated. Lord of the Rings, Return of the King won because on its own, it was stellar. It was stellar. Godfather 2 won because on its own, it was completely stellar. So I don't think so. But I could be wrong. Absolutely. And there are other people who are going to have different opinions. But if you're asking me my opinion, I don't think so, but who knows? All right, James, thanks for sending that in, Anonymous. James Hopkins writes, men buy comics and go see these comic book movies more than anyone. Men don't want to see a movie that lectures them about being horrible men. That's why Birds of Prey failed. Oh, you're so wrong. You're so wrong about that. True, strong female characters like Ellen Ripley, Beatrix Kiddo, Charlie Baltimore, Katniss Everdeen, Trinity, Hit Girl, Buffy, Summers, blah, 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 Resident Evil are names I would gladly yell from the mountaintops. These women didn't have to bash and tear down men to make themselves look better. Well, James, all I can say, dude, is you clearly didn't watch Birds of Prey, because that's not what happened in Birds of Prey. There was nothing. There wasn't a single line in Birds of Prey. And I don't like the movie. Let's be clear. I didn't like Birds of Prey. I don't think it's a good movie. But I saw the movie. There is not one line in the movie where any of that is evident. It's not like Supergirl. Like in the TV show Supergirl, there is a lot of, I'm a woman and therefore as a woman I can do it. I'm a girl and I can do it. And that's fine. Look, I'm not bashing on it for doing that. I'm just saying that's in there a lot. If you want to criticize Supergirl for that, you've got a case to make because they do that. You clearly didn't see Birds of Prey because that's not in Birds of Prey. So you kind of just tipped your hand that you're complaining about a movie you didn't even see. Again, if you were talking about Supergirl, I could go, well, I don't think there's anything wrong with them doing that. But yes, you're right. They do that in Supergirl. That is a part of that show. That is a very active, normal part of that show. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You do. Okay, you've at least got a point to make. That's not in Birds of Prey. That's not in Birds of Prey. I think you're just seeing a movie filled with female characters and you're assuming that if it's all female characters, then that means they're bashing men. No. Then some idiot says to me, well, all the villains in it are guys. All the villains in Arnold Schwarzenegger movies are guys. What's the difference? You know, Tulsa Doom in Conan is a guy. His main henchmen were guys. Was that Conan bashing on men? No. Then why is the hero being women and the villains still being guys like they are in Arnold's movies, like they are in Sylvester's movies, like they are in Jean-Claude's movies. Why is that? Was Jean-Claude and Sylvester and Arnold, were they bashing men? No, their villains were men. These villains are men. It doesn't mean they were bashing on men. So anyway, James, that's my one response to you, buddy. I mean, again, it's either one of two things happened here. You didn't see the movie, or you just kind of projected onto the movie what your pre-existing assumption was, because that's just not a part of this film, really. It's really not. But anyway, there's that. All right, next up, Mark C. writes, early last summer, it was announced Tim Miller's CG animated movie studio is bringing Eric Powell's zombie-killing mob leg breaker, The Goon, to the big screen. Have you heard any updates? None. I've heard none updates. Now, it's also important to point out, I haven't heard anything concerning about it either. Like, I haven't heard it was pulled. I haven't heard it was shelved. I haven't heard anything like that. And these projects can take a long, long time to do. So while I have heard no updates to the positive, I've also heard no updates to the negative. So it's kind of in a limbo there right now. Mark also writes, when Hollywood canceled Mel Gibson, did they erase his version of Hamlet? I haven't seen it streamed, talked about, or come across in physical media in years. I don't know that you can make that argument, because all of his other movies are still out there. So you can't say they canceled them, so they canceled this one specific movie when all of his other ones, as a matter of fact, they're talking about doing another Lethal Weapon at this point. So, I don't know. I haven't watched Hamlet in forever. To be honest, Mel Gibson's Hamlet, not one of my favorites of Mel Gibson either, so I haven't really paid attention to that. Jew writes, hey, John, do you remember when you did that 24-hour benefit drive I did for the tragedy in the Philippines? Whatever happened with the Schnepp drawings? End the vid with famous point send-off. I don't know. I know for a long time, I had to give him a hard time for like a year after that, saying, make sure you get those. So look, here's the story. As we were doing this 24-hour marathon to raise funds for the typhoon victims in the Philippines, and I got deathly sick from doing that 24-hour marathon. I got more sick than I've been ever in my life. Anyway, during it, we were raising so much money, like way more money than we thought we were going to raise, that John Schnepp, who was doing the 24-hour marathon as well, he got so caught up in like the generosity of everybody that he said, tell you what, you guys donate X amount of dollars and I'll do your own drawing. I'll do a drawing for you. The problem was, I think John got so swept up in what he was doing that I don't think he appreciated how much work he was committing himself to. So we got to like 6 months after it and the drawings weren't done. And I remember I'd go say, John, you got to get these done. And then like a year had passed and like there were still people who had knocked on their things. I said, John, you got these done. I believe he got them all done. I think I remember him telling me they finally got all done. But anyway, that was the thing with that. So I think they got done. I believe they got done. At least I hope they did. All right, Captain Chicken Pants writes, I don't like when people ask who's the best version of Joker. Hamill is a voiceover. Nicholson and Ledger were supporting roles. Leto was a side character, and one had their own movie. Is that fair? Well, I mean, regardless of how much the character is in, you still get a feel for that character, and you can have a favorite or least favorite iteration, even in a small window of time. So I'm cool with that. Because Leto, you still got a feel for what that Leto is, what that Leto Joker was. And you can either love that iteration or not love it. It doesn't matter that one was a supporting, one was a lead. I don't think it really matters. I think when people ask who is your favorite Joker, what they're really asking is, when you look at what the character was, what that manifestation of that character was, whether it was the lead or supporting is irrelevant. I think when most people are asking that question, they're asking just what was your favorite manifestation of it. So I don't personally see any problem with the question. All right, Suthius writes, although there were some things changed and the whole story not shown, to see Ford v Ferrari in cinematic form was great. Acting was great. Enjoyed it very much. To me, Ford v Ferrari was a top 5 of the year. It is a movie that should, I believe, have gotten more buzz from people and should have gotten more Oscar love than it did. Now, it got a Best Picture nomination, but everybody knew it was never really in the running to win. And I really honestly felt like Ford v Ferrari should have been in the discussion with Parasite, with 1917, with obviously I felt like Jojo Rabbit should have been in there as well. But I really thought it should have been one of the top contenders. I really do, because oh God, I love that movie. It's so good. All right. Final question of the day, guys. We're past 11 o'clock. We got through them all. Final question today comes to us from Super Crazy Movie Geek, who writes, will Lucas ever direct again TV film for our eyes? I don't think so. I don't know that, but I honestly don't think he will. And if he does, it'll be something animated, I believe. You know, George Lucas just famously did not like working with actors. He didn't like directing actors. There's a famous story. First, he said that a lot, but there's a famous story where Ron Howard, who had worked with George Lucas on American Graffiti, and Ron Howard, who was a good friend of George Lucas, he tells a story about how George heard while making American Graffiti that Ron wanted to become a director. And George sat down with him all excited and say, oh yeah, absolutely. He goes, man, go into animation. Go into animation. Because then you don't have to worry about dealing with actors. You don't have to work with actors. Just do your thing. Go into animation. And Ron Howard's like, I don't know if George realized he was talking to one of his actors while saying, I don't like working with actors. But he said, so that was a clear thing. So I think if we do see George ever direct something in, which I do not think he will, but if he does, I'm guessing it'll be something animated. That's just a guess. I don't know that for sure, but that is my guess. All right, guys. That will do it for today's installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you so much for being here and making this show a part of your day. Thank you to Robert Meyer Burnett for being here and shedding all of his glory on us. Thanks to all of you for making this show a part of your day. It's so honoring that you guys would take time out of your day to join the community here and let this show be a part of your day. It's just awesome. So thank you so much for that. And a special thank you to everybody who sent in questions. Number one, because you gave us great fun things to talk about. Number two, also because you supported the channel while you were doing it. And all of us here, thank you very, very much for that. Thank you for supporting the content that you guys like watching. Guys, don't forget the John Campea Show returns again tomorrow. Make sure you're here for that. And by the way, guys, if you want one of your questions to be one of the first questions answered, you can use that tip link that we showed you a little bit earlier. It's in the top line of the description of this video. You can use that anytime 24/7. And if you're one of the first questions that come in, it's one of the first questions that gets answered tomorrow. So just something to keep in mind. All right, guys, that will do it for me today. Thank you so much for being here. And listen, for those of you guys who are Patreon supporters, we are going to do a John Campea Show post-show chat over on the Discord server. So for those of you who are Patreon supporters and you've already connected up to our Discord server, we're going to do a quick John Campea chat over there in just about 5 or 10 minutes after this show ends. Okay, guys, that will do it for me for now for today. Thanks a lot for being here. My name is John Campea. And until next time, guys, bye-bye.